And welcome to the May 2018 edition of City Connection. It's the live call-in program where you, the citizen of Grand Rapids, you can ask your mayor about local issues with Community Media Center. I'm Linda Galash. Grand Rapids Mayor Rosalynn Bliss is live in studio today. We'll be talking to over a number of topics, and we'll take your questions later in the show. But today we also have in studio Second Ward Commissioner Joe Jones. We'll have an in-depth conversation about what's going on in the Second Ward. We'll also have opportunity for you. You get to take part with your conversation with the mayor through telephone. You can do that through our line. It's 616-459-4881. Email cityconnection@grcmc.org or send your tweets to GRTV Access. Facebook as well, and probably therapidian.org, live streaming there. Again, May 7th, 2018 edition here on Community Media Center's GRTV Livewire, Channel 24. Got a little ahead of myself there, but welcome to another great spring month here in Grand Rapids. May 7th, and it couldn't be nicer. It just took a little while to get here.
It did. I think I got a little excited for spring, a little too early. But yes, it is here, and I'm happy for that.
Very good weather, great. You were just mentioning how many things are going on here in our city right now, and it's just the activity and the excitement to be able to get out in this very, very pretty atmosphere. Let's run through a few things before we speak with Commissioner Jones, but we mentioned this a time or two before about age-friendly community, and actually the city took action recently to make it official to seek this designation. So fill us in on some of that.
Yeah, I was happy to see that come before us. I've been talking about it for several months, and even the city and Commissioner Kelly actually has taken the lead on this. For about the last year and a half, we've been having these listening sessions, really talking about what are the areas in the city that we need to take a look at to be more age-friendly, wanting to be a place where seniors feel like they're really connected, with that they have the services that they need, but also where they feel like they can age in place. So last year we did a number of listening sessions and a pretty significant community-wide survey. And then we've been working in partnership with AARP, looking at what the process is to go through to become a designated age-friendly community. And what that entails is doing a more in-depth assessment along 8 domains, identifying where you're doing well and then areas where you have gaps, and then coming up with an action plan to meet those needs or to make improvements. So the City Commission, at our last meeting, we had a presentation by our Planning Director, Suzanne Schultz, talking about that, and then we passed a formal resolution seeking it's actually the initiation of the process to start the age-friendly community assessment.
So what are the criteria that make this a designation?
Yeah, so they actually look at a number of domains, and including transportation, access to healthcare, civic engagement, housing, I already said transportation, access to parks and green space, social connectivity, and so they have criteria in each of the 8 domains. And then you do an assessment. You also have an advisory council that's put together that you work with to work through the process, and then you have support from AARP to help you through that.
So does the city then pick an advisory council and put together members to do this?
Okay. Yeah, so we're in the process of doing that. So we passed the resolution that will be submitted to AARP and the World Health Organization, which is really the umbrella organization that started this age-friendly community movement. And then we'll put together a local advisory council, and I'll be on that along with a couple of my colleagues, and then we'll have city staff. I don't know if you've met Virginia Smith, but she's been really active in this work through the planning department.
And possibly she joined you on air one time here.
Oh, she did. Yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. So we'll invite people to be members of that, and then we'll start working through the process.
So a lot of those designations, or a lot of those categories, are the very same ones that we've talked about maybe over the last few years about keeping graduates from leaving the city. So it's those same sort of things in large part, not completely, but in large part, that keep this a place that people want to stay or be in.
There's incredible overlap, and that's exactly what we heard during the listening sessions. And honestly, there's a lot of synergy around the issues that we're working on now that we heard through the listening process, like affordable housing. I think that one just rose to the top. is that people want to make sure that they, as they age and maybe once they move to a fixed income, that they can still afford to live in the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we seem to maybe tend to divide people by generation or age categories and all that, and then some of that, the needs or the desires are really very similar, very much the same.
Yeah.
All right, well, we were talking a lot about just how spring is here, and the city kicked off something called a Summer of Safety campaign, and that began with the beginning of this month.
It did. So we've actually been on this, I would say, process of trying to educate the community around bicycle safety, pedestrian safety for a couple years now. So this is building on what we've done in the past, and then also being more intentional around providing education to both drivers and riders and pedestrians around the rules of the road. So this will have a really, I would say, a more intensive education process where we'll have individuals out at certain intersections stopping people and educating them about the rules. And then the really, in my opinion, exciting part of this campaign is that we are partnering with drivers' education organizations throughout the community. We have about a dozen drivers' education companies that are working with us to make sure that the students who go through their training program, that they are receiving really good education about pedestrian safety and bicycle safety. So we're beefing up that curriculum during driver's education to make sure that young drivers also know what the rules are when it comes to when you see somebody at a crosswalk, what the expectation is. When you see somebody on their bicycle on the side of the road, what's the expectation? And then we're also working, this is separate but also connected, through our mobile GR department. We are working with the Bicycle Coalition of West Michigan to also be providing education for cyclists, both how to learn how to ride their bike, but also specifically to learn how to ride their bike in an urban, densely populated area, which, as you know, is very different than riding on a trail, you know, maybe up in Rockford or, you know, another area that doesn't have the population that we have.
And add to that sort of a variation of the rules when it comes to construction zones and being able to get around those, and it does play into it.
Yeah, and you know, the feedback I've heard from the community, and I couldn't agree more. This isn't about just educating, you know, one population. This is about making sure whether you're a pedestrian or a cyclist, or you're on your skateboard, or you're in your car, you are making sure that you're mindful of everyone else using the roads, and you are really following the rules. So for like even pedestrians, we'll be doing a lot of education around crossing at crosswalks, because a lot of accidents that happen, it's people who are crossing the street, you know, mid-block and not at a crosswalk, and that's dangerous. So we need to educate across the board, whether you're walking or on your bike or in your car. How do we make sure that our streets are safe for everyone?
And are there going to be like trainings that open to the public? How is that going to come about?
We'll be doing some PR campaigns, some education, so you'll continue to see PSAs, billboards, education out in different ways. And then there will be the hands-on education and then the on-the-street education.
Okay.
Yeah.
So great time of year to get that going.
Yeah.
An event called Kids Speak Tearing Down Walls. Tell a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, so April, we had some great events in April, including our annual Kids Speak. So this is an event that is actually sponsored by and put on all over the state through Michigan's Children, which is a statewide organization really looking at policies that impact and improve the lives of children. And so our Mayor's Youth Council here in Grand Rapids, every year they organize and facilitate this event, and they select the topic, they select the questions, they take applications for young people who want to speak, and then what it is it's a 2-hour block of time where elected officials come. It takes place at City Hall. We sit and we listen to young people of all ages. I think the youngest this year was a second grader who spoke, all the way up to seniors in high school. And the topic that was selected this year was on immigration and the impact that the current immigration laws have on young people. And we had well over 20 young people speak through the course of a 2-hour span, and it was unbelievably powerful. Heart-wrenching and thoughtful, and you know, young people who are, you know, some young people who spoke are refugees, and they talked about their experience coming and moving here, and some of the discrimination that they experience. We had young people talking about having one of their parents deported unexpectedly, and just the impact that has on their lives, and really their hopes for having a place where they can live and call home, where they can be successful. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, it's online. You can pull it up on YouTube. But it was a really powerful day of lots of testimony.
So just revisit for us a little bit about how things stand here when it comes to immigration type issues. There's only so much that the city can do, but what is a stance that the city takes on this?
So a couple things. So the city is a welcoming city. We actually have been for years. We were one of the first cities to sign up when the Governor Snyder, initiated that, saying that we want to be a welcoming state, but also a welcoming city. We have really close relationships with folks in Lansing. And welcoming a city, what that means is that we want to be a place where when people come, that they feel welcome, that they feel included, where they feel they can connect, and where they feel safe. And so we have that. We also recently passed an equal service policy. That was about a year ago. So that if somebody comes in for city services, they're not asked about their immigration status. And then last fall, in partnership with the Grand Rapids Public Schools, we launched an Our City Academy for new Grand Rapidians. So people who move here new to the city, they can go through a 6-week program and learn about city services, how to get engaged, as well as how to connect with the school. So it was a partnership with Grand Rapids Public Schools and us. We had a number of speakers, and the hope was that people just feel more connected, but also that they feel educated about local services.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ongoing issues there, and sometimes it just wonders
issues.
if it's going to put the city at odds with some federal regulation, but the city has a particular mission in this.
Yeah, we do, and that's the concern, though. I've talked to a lot of people. We heard from a number of folks who wanted us to become a sanctuary city, and the potential negative impact of that is that you could lose significant federal funds. So our city, like many cities across the country, we receive millions and millions of dollars in federal funds. A lot of those dollars are used for community block grants, home dollars that helps with our emergency shelter grants, as well as housing, but also we get grants in the fire department. So even the grant we received when we first started our smoke detector program, that was a federal grant. We get COPS grants to support some of the work that we're doing in the police department. And there's a real threat that you could jeopardize those dollars. But then also other cities, they have found that they have put a target on their back, and they've seen significant increase in enforcement. So it's hard when you're in this seat because you don't want to do anything that will have an unintended negative consequence, especially on the people that you're trying to help and help feel safe. So it's been a really difficult issue under the current administration.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that.
Yeah.
Couple updates on some city positions, including the city manager position, now that the position is again open for applications.
Yeah, so city manager position is posted. We're actively, not we, but our search firm is actively taking applications. It'll be open until June 13th, and then the city commission will be walking through and coming up with a process to do the interviews and the community forum, and hopefully be able to make a decision in July with someone starting by the end of probably mid to late August.
And just a couple clarifying elements to that. There's a new search firm from who did it previously,
Yes.
and that was being, again, the whole process of having the community input and the community forum part of it. Date for that one yet?
We don't.
Okay.
So part of that, we probably won't solidify that until we have a chance to know how many applicants we want to interview and really think through that process. And so probably closer to June, we'll have a sense of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other position that's going to be open soon is a third ward seat with David Allen announcing he's going to step down. So how's this process going to go?
Yes, so Commissioner Allen has decided to step down. His last day on the commission will be June 12th. After he announced that, actually Commissioner Lanier and I spent quite a bit of time talking about options and process moving forward. And through those conversations with Commissioner Lanier, we talked about a couple things, as well as some of the concerns we were hearing from the community. But we talked about the need for having somebody that can really hit the ground running, that knows the job, knows the city, but also that either can't or is not interested in running next year, because a year from now, people will be campaigning for this seat. And we've heard critical feedback in the past about when we make an appointment, how that gives the individual a leg up for the election, for the upcoming election, because they're able to go into that election as an incumbent versus someone new. And so they felt that it's an unfair playing field. But also we have a lot of critical issues. As you said, we have city manager coming up. We're in the midst of the work we're doing with community and police relations. We're in the middle of the affordable housing work that we're doing. And a brand new commissioner, they have a really significant learning curve because this is a big job. And so through a number of conversations, Commissioner Lanier and I at last week's City Commission meeting put out the idea to the full commission to consider, instead of having an application process like we've done in the past with interviews before selecting, we made the recommendation to consider appointing former City Commissioner Jim White to come in and fill that interim period, which is about 16 months. He would be able to come in, he knows the job, he knows it really well. Even though he's been off the commission for a few years, he's been still actively engaged in the community. But then also, he'll be able to dedicate 100% of his time on city commission issues and not have to be looking to gear up for a campaign next year. So he'll be able to serve, be really focused on city commission, what's coming before us, and then also mentor whoever is elected by Third Ward residents. He'll be able to mentor them to help them learn the job during that transition period after the election.
And then a couple questions real quick. Is he willing? Has he expressed his willingness?
He is willing. He is. In fact, that was something that we asked if we threw this idea out, would he even consider it? And he said yes, that if the commission, if the will of the majority of the commission was for him to do that, that he would be willing to do it.
Okay, so the commission has the right to appoint for the fulfilling the remainder of that seat. So then the next election time, he's already stated that he's not seeking to run.
Right, and he wouldn't be eligible under term limits.
That's why he's out now. Is that right?
Okay. Yeah, and he wasn't planning to run again. So that was of his own free will. He decided that he was going to step down. So a couple questions have come up. People have asked about term limits. The term limit language is really clear about election and running for office, not appointments. Okay. And then the other question we've been asked is about process, and the charter language, and what we're bound to do is to appoint someone, but the charter is silent on process. So we have used kind of an interview process in the past, but we're not bound to that legally in any way. It's really the mind of the commission to make a decision about who will fulfill the remainder of an open seat or a vacancy up until the time of the next election.
Okay. Thanks for filling us in on that. We're going to get to a break real quick here because we have Commissioner Joe in the next room. Joe Jones is going to be visiting with Mayor Bliss here shortly. So we'll take a break here on City Connection.
Join us tonight, May 7th, for Celebrating One Another, a storytelling event for the Rapidian. This special event tonight will feature guest speakers sharing a powerful, true story about identity and their own journey. Tickets are still available and they are $20 at the door. Doors will open at 6:30 p.m. Join us for an evening of storytelling, relationship building, and an opportunity to support the voices of community members. Don't miss this special event. Proceeds from our special event will help us put on our community journalism workshops and provide training to individual community writers. For more information about the Rapidian, visit therapidian.org or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also register to become a reporter and learn how to submit your own stories by visiting our website. Get involved today and be a part of the conversation.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
A community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
Thank you. I am really happy to have with me today my colleague on the commission, 2nd Ward City Commissioner Joe Jones. In fact, he filled my seat when it became vacant, and it's been really fantastic to serve with him on the City Commission. So today, we're just going to spend a little time talking about you and your work and a little bit about what's going on in the 2nd Ward, and then we'll do some Q&A. But for folks that don't know you, why don't you share a little bit about who you are and your history here in the city. I'm sure a lot of people don't know that you're also the CEO at Urban League. So maybe you can talk a little bit just about yourself and kind of what led you to the path of City Commission.
Very cool. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Mayor. It's always good to hang out with you outside of City Hall.
That's right.
Yeah, my story. I actually have led the Urban League of West Michigan now for 7 years. Actually, it'll be 7 years in July.
Wow.
And we're celebrating 75 years of existence this year, the Urban League is. So that's a pretty big deal. And so we're celebrating throughout the year. And the Urban League, for those who don't know, it's an organization that has really served in many ways as a significant help to those who have been historically marginalized in the areas of employment, housing assistance, health, and education. And we have been positioned very strategically to help folks in all facets of life. On the employment side of things, we help folks who are perhaps just getting out of prison, and we also help folks get into jobs in the C-suite. So we've been able to develop ourselves into something that hopefully the community can take full advantage of, and for me it's a labor of love. And in many ways, that explains my work with the commission. I'm a transplant. I moved here 21 years ago from Detroit. And believe it or not, when I was growing up in Detroit, I had a dream. And my dream and my goal was to be the mayor of Detroit. I had mad respect for Coleman Young growing up, as did most African American men and boys, in my age group growing up in Detroit. And so when I got here, my wife brought me here. My beloved was raised here in Grand Rapids. And the thought was, this will probably be the place in which we settle down. It was the place in which she was the most comfortable, but I'm the youngest of 9, big family like yourself. And this was a very difficult transition because I left all of my siblings and my parents to come here. But for the last 21 years, it's been a ball. It's been a lot of ups and downs in terms of being intimately involved with community at the grassroots level, but also now to be part of change and to really be a part of hopefully creating a city that's more equitable and a city that creates opportunities for all people. It's what gets me up in the morning. It's what keeps me coming to work, both jobs. And again, it's a labor of love.
Yeah. Well, and of course I'm biased, but being mayor of Grand Rapids is way better than mayor of Detroit.
I would
So-
agree.
And
I would agree.
being on the Grand Rapids City Commission is way more fun than the Detroit Council.
I agree. Yeah.
So you've been on the commission just over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
You ran for election and won in the primary. And you have been really engaged in a number of issues, not just in the second ward and in neighborhood issues, but then also around the issues around community and police relations and a number of others, obviously affordable housing, which is what we're tackling right now.
Yep.
So why don't you talk a little bit about some of the things you've been working on in the second ward, and you can even touch on community and police relations.
Sure. As you mentioned, I had the good fortune of stepping in when you had made the decision to run for mayor and obviously win. And I will tell you that when the opportunity presented itself to be considered for the appointment, there was a lot of prayer that went into that, because the one thing that I think distinguishes the second ward from the others is that we have a citizenry that is very engaged. And we also have neighborhood associations and business associations that are very, very engaged. And so it makes for, I think in many ways, it makes for the job to be easier. And because myself and Commissioner Kelly, as I'm sure you can also relate to, we're kept informed in terms of what the people want, what they're thinking. And so that helps. So there's no guessing, I think, in the role that I play in the second ward. And so once appointed and had the opportunity to run and be elected on last year, I've had a real opportunity to really spend time in the neighborhoods, knock on doors, to meet a lot of people across the ward, which, by the way, is a significant chunk of real estate. It's big. I don't think people
so
realize
big.
just how big the second ward is.
I know,
right?
until you're knocking on those
So you're
doors.
knocking on doors, right? Which is crazy. But it's what's occurred is, I think the second ward and some of the issues that I'm involved in is really around everything from affordable housing to equitable development, right? As you know, we are in a city that is just prospering greatly. People want to live in the city. They want to take advantage of our green space, they want to take advantage of all the mobility options, and they want to be able to experience quite often the diversity that exists within neighborhoods. And so, you know, the second ward is in the middle of all that. And so we're seeing the dynamic growth around small business, but also around housing and the need for, you know, for some affordable housing options that, as you know, are very, very, very hard to come by. And so it's required us at the commission level, as well as those in the community, to put our thinking caps on and to come up with some ideas that will hopefully alleviate some of the pressure that's being applied, because I think it's a double-edged sword, right? There's a desire, of course, to grow the city and to grow the density, but I think we in no means want to put people out. We in no means want to have folks feel as if they're in a position where they can't live in the city. And I'm afraid that that's what's occurring. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to be very strategic and thoughtful and discerning as to how we try to get at that issue, knowing that it's something that not only are we dealing with, it's a national issue. And even our first ring, you know, the cities in the first ring suburbs, they're also dealing with some of the same issues. And so that's something that I've kind of dove into head first. And I'm fortunate to be teamed up with your former colleague, with Commissioner Kelly, who, by the way, I often say I've got the best gig in the city because my partner is Ruth Kelly, and that's true.
She's amazing.
Yes, she is. And so we work very well together. We work collaboratively, and it's good to work with someone, again, whose heart is in the place of wanting to not just help, but really wanting to, you know, see more and more people prosper. And so not only is the issue around affordable housing, but it's also about, you know, the opportunity to create jobs and small business opportunities for those who have been historically marginalized, primarily African American Latino folks in their city, to prosper economically. Because then what I find to be true is if you're able to prosper economically, you have options, you have choices, right? Compared to if you are limited in your prosperity, limited in your income, your options are few. And so I think, again, it's our responsibility to help in those efforts. We don't have all the answers, but I think that's what makes Grand Rapids great, is the fact that we have a community, we have this mindset of wanting to work in a more collaborative way to find solutions together. And so that's keeping me busy as well. And as you mentioned, the issue of police and community, something that's very near and dear to my heart because there's such history behind that. And we're talking about an issue that is so delicate in nature. It's a very uncomfortable conversation to have in terms of why we have some of the outcomes that we have, some of the disparate outcomes that we have in terms of police interaction within communities of color, in particular with African American men and males. And I'm of the opinion that we get to a better place if we commit to two things in particular. One is if we all commit to really being engaged in the space of civil discourse, of having very honest and open dialogue about the issue, about the history of policing, about some of the biases that exist on all sides. It's not just something that we can focus on the men in blue. It's all aspects of community that have bias when it comes to interaction with police and community. And I think the second thing is understanding that we can disagree without being disagreeable. And really operating from a place of sincerity and realizing that at the end of the day, if one doesn't have my lived experience, I think it's very difficult for them to be able to speak on what it's like being me. And when it comes to the issue of policing in communities of color, there are just some things that most folks, if you're not of color, you're just not going to understand. And that's okay. The goal is to put folks in a position where they can be informed, be enlightened. Because I start with the premise that you don't know what you don't know. But if we can get people more informed and understanding, and really have people understand why communities of color feel the way that we do about police interaction, I think that, again, all of those things, all of those strategies of really engaging in the uncomfortable will get us to a better place. I believe that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so grateful that you're on the commission during this season because it is really complex. And being able to have those very difficult conversations is critical to change. And it's not an us against them. It is, we want our officers to be safe and we want people in the community to be safe. And we really want to think about what does community policing look like? And how do we do it different?
We as you know, we had the recent discussion at City Hall during City Commission about the dynamic of police and community. And I said that at that time, and I believe wholeheartedly, we also have to consider the type of environment that we're putting our officers into. To your point, it is about making sure that our officers are feeling safe. They are in positions in which the job that they do is very dangerous. That's something that I'm reminded of every single day. I try my best to empathize with those in law enforcement. And so there's no doubt that they're in a very, very difficult space. And so I'm very sensitive to the type of situations that we're putting our officers in. And I know that one of the benefits of our department is we have a very well-trained police force. What I also understand, and I think that if the more we have conversations, perhaps they would agree that really there's no such thing as having too much training or too much understanding, especially when it comes to the why, and being able to answer some of those questions of, why do people feel this way, or why are we received in this way? And really, again, getting to a place where we can see each other through a lens of humanity. Because ultimately, I believe the foundation in all of this, whether it be police and community, whether it be, the division that exists within our country these days between black and white, I believe the foundation, the answer is love. Some would say that's too simple, too simplistic. I don't think so. I think that when you're operating in the place of knowing someone and beginning to develop relationship, it's really difficult to even consider bringing harm. So.
Well, that is a perfect note to end on. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we'll come over here and we'll have some Q&A.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yep.
I'm Daniela Rojas, and I'm here with the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan to invite you to our 3rd annual Sabor Latino Gala, scheduled for next week, Saturday, May 12th at 20 Monroe Live. This year marks our 40th year of service in the Hispanic community, and we want you to be there to celebrate with us. We will also be awarding our founders and recognizing 2 exceptional youths that have gone on to do wonderful things in the Grand Rapids community. For tickets, you can go to universe.com. Tickets are $100, and a portion will go to benefit our programming at the Hispanic Center. We hope to see you all there.
The Rapidian for the community provides an alternative.
To be the eyes of somebody who's not there.
It's more honest, more authentic, and more true.
And you do have the freedom to talk about things because they're things that need to be talked about, not because they'll get readers or viewers or clicks.
Sometimes it feels intimidating to write a news story or to write a story about a community issue. What I love about the Rapidian is that they make it really simple and easy.
So it's not like you have to meet this deadline by this time.
I'll be eating a sandwich in one hand and then I'm like typing in the other.
I love the freedom to be able to write from wherever.
I think it's a really powerful experience when people are able to tell their story and to be heard.
Anyone can have a voice.
Anybody can speak.
It's a platform for the community to tell its own story in a very authentic way, and that's powerful.
A community has to be involved in order for it to be sustainable. And so it tells you something about our community.
I'm Linda Galash in studio with Mayor Rosalynn Bliss and Commissioner Joe Jones, just having a great conversation. You two were most recently about police and community relations, community police relations, and was really intrigued by this, the simplicity of simply civil discourse being a great starting point, or at least a foundation of how we move ahead. And you had made a comment, Commissioner Jones, that was, are we willing to kind of get down to the hard conversations? And I wondered if you feel like we are. Are we there? Where do we need to go? How do we get down to the very difficult questions, the very difficult conversations?
It's a good question, Linda. I think that I've been at tables where there's a desire and a willingness to engage in the very difficult conversations. And it's something that I'm constantly promoting, this idea of civil discourse, because I do think that there's really room for opportunity to see change if we engage more in discourse. And yet there's a focus right now on, I think really there's too much of a focus of trying to really promote the opposing views that exist on most issues and topics. I think it's the way of our society these days. I think in light of what's happening in our nation's capital and just the overall mood of our country, is there seems to be a greater focus on what separates us. And so, you know, civil discourse can touch on that, but it really, you know, what I promote at all times is, you know, it's clear that we all have a pretty good idea of what the problem is. Can we spend more time talking about, you know, some potential solutions, and do it in such a way to where, you know, it's not accusatory, it's not threatening, but it really is, again, kind of operating from a place of dignity, like really respecting the other person. You may not agree with the other person, because I have a lot of conversations these days at tables where I don't agree with the individuals, but I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to engage, and it's not because I'm trying to change their minds. I just think that there's a level of respect that we need to show for one another that says that, hey, what you believe matters, and all I'm asking is that you consider the fact that what I believe matters as well.
Yeah.
So.
Then you really kind of centered on the word human or humanity,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of is sounding like what you're bringing out right now, that if we treated everybody like humans with that sort of respect, then maybe that does allow an opening for some progress. There can be a lot of talk, though, and a lot of dialogue that doesn't necessarily make any change.
Mm-hmm.
You're really positive about where the city is and where we are right now, and I'm wondering what gives you the positive feeling or the positive hope right now.
I think first of all, I'm a very optimistic individual, and I really do believe in my heart of hearts that Grand Rapids as a city has the potential to be the best medium-sized city in our country. I believe that we have the potential to be a model city because we have all the ingredients. I believe we have the ingredients of infrastructure. We have, I think we have the fiscal ingredients. But I think what we need to do is make sure that the right cooks are in the kitchen, so to speak. And so I really do look at life through a lens of the glass being half full, because I try to find the best in every person. And I think that we have enough individuals, enough groups and folks in our community who want that same thing, who want to create this community that they're proud of or prouder of, a community in which they can raise their children and their grandchildren. And just to give you some idea of how I'm wired, Linda, I spend a lot of time thinking about my grandchildren's grandchildren. That is that's a generation I won't meet, but it's critically important for me at least to try to do all that I can and engage in the work of making sure that the Grand Rapids that awaits them is much better and much more equitable than the Grand Rapids that we have today. And I think that I'm not alone in that thinking. I believe that there are others who have that same mindset, that have that same desire to create a community that is, again, much more equitable and just a community that is grand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, it reminds me of the conversation that we've been having around the commission table, also around affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, we've talked about this in prior episodes, and there was a lot of anxiety in the community, a lot of opposition to a number of recommendations that came forward about zoning and zoning changes. And we had a lot of people come out and speak at our commission meetings talking about why they supported or opposed, mostly opposed, some of the recommendations. And we listened, we paused, but we also were very clear that what ties us all together is wanting our city to have affordable housing. Mm-hmm. That whoever wants to live here, they should be able to afford to live here. We may not all agree on how we get there and how we make that happen, but at least we have this shared goal, this shared vision for our community that brings us back to working together even when we don't agree. And then we're also willing to pause, to listen more. Mm-hmm. We're going to be working with public agency, part of WMCAT, to have a number of community processes to really delve into those 4 recommendations, those 4 zoning recommendations, and identify if there are parts of them that we can agree on to move forward, and then which parts need to be a part of the larger master planning process, which we're going to get ready to launch soon. But it's that same fundamental belief that whatever the issue is, no matter how unbelievably complex it is, what ties us together is much stronger than what brings us apart.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
On a similar sort of vein, been here 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
You're 7 or so years in your position at Urban League, but now somewhat new to the commission.
Mm-hmm.
Why now? What prompted you to take that step at this point?
Well, a lot of folks don't know, back in '99, I actually ran for city commission. Mm-hmm. I lived in the 3rd Ward at that time, and I remember the slate. The slate consisted of Bill Blickley, who was a former 3rd Ward city commissioner, Reverend Robert Dean, Bing Goy, Alex Murdowski, and myself. We were all on the ballot, and I had been here for a little bit over 2 years and felt the desire to get involved. I was actually fortunate enough to get the endorsement of George Hartwell, who was the outgoing 3rd Ward City Commissioner. Mm-hmm. And so I've always had strong ties to the work. Even before that run, I've always been actively involved at City Hall, availing myself to participate on committees and boards and really trying to understand the inner workings of the city. And there was a time also in the 2000s, I can't remember what year, but I was a finalist. I was one of 2 finalists for the appointment to replace Scott Bowen in the 3rd Ward. And that was a seat in which Jim White was selected. And so I'm not so much a stranger to City Hall. I just had the opportunity, I guess recently in 2016, actually be selected. So it's, as I mentioned, it's work that I enjoy. It's a labor of love. Many people ask me, just based on today's politics and today's world of being an elected official, the question always comes, why? Why would you do that? It's thankless, it's difficult. And I tell them with a straight face, I said, it's clearly it's labor of love. Because I care that much for my city and for my community that I feel as if I can bring something to the table and the ability to convene and bring folks together. It's something that I've been able to do since I've been here in Grand Rapids. The Urban League has helped me in that regard. It's part of the history of the league is to have that ability to pull folks together. And so, you know, my desire is to serve, is to be that one who's recognized as someone who will listen, even to opposing viewpoints, and to hopefully be someone who is remembered as being very solutions oriented. So that's the why. That's why I'm doing it. That's why now. And I love it. I really do. Sounds, for some people it's crazy, but I love it.
Well, and I will add, Commissioner Jones is very humble. He also has a servant heart through and through. I mean, he's unbelievably authentic, but bottom line, he is a public servant. He is, whenever someone talks to me about leadership, that we talk about servant leadership, and that's, he really embodies that. And so maybe all those prior opportunities, it wasn't the right time. Right. Because I do believe that in every season, there's purpose, and I really believe that in this season, having Commissioner Jones around the table is absolutely critical as we face some of the issues that we're facing.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's true.
Thank you.
Great to talk with you and great to learn a little bit about you and your role here in our city. We close out this break, but I hope you'll visit us again here on City Connection.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah. Commissioner Joe Jones here on City Connection. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to City Connection, and thanks for being a part of our visit with Commissioner Joe Jones. Mayor, we've got even a question now, but it was very informative to speak with Commissioner Jones. But we do have a question that is out of what we discussed earlier about the city manager process. This is from Dennis, and it says, have there been any changes to the city manager hiring process other than the change in the firm based on the community reaction to the first attempt? So any changes in the process?
So the process up until now, I would say, hasn't changed dramatically. So once we had a new firm in place, we reviewed the candidate profile. We made some changes to that, actually. And then the consultant that we're working with really spent time on the front end thinking about recruitment and doing more targeted recruitment, especially in the Midwest. So if you followed some of the conversations that we had with during the last process, we were really questioning why we didn't get more candidates from larger Midwest cities, even individuals who are serving in like a assistant city manager position, maybe in Cincinnati or Indianapolis or Louisville or Milwaukee or Madison, Illinois. I think the dilemma is, and we talked about this a little bit during the first process, is that for a city our size, we're one of the few larger cities that have a city manager council form of government. And so a lot of larger cities are strong mayors. And so it's difficult even when you look around the state of Michigan. Detroit has a strong mayor, Lansing has a strong mayor, Flint has a strong mayor. And so you don't get larger cities that you can pull from and attract talent from. And so we really talked on the front end with this firm about how do we just be more intentional and make sure that we're getting high caliber candidates that fit the candidate profile that was heavily informed by the community. As we look to, and then once we get the applications, the search firm will go through those. The difference is that we created a subcommittee of the City Commission who will work with the search firm and work on developing a process that takes into consideration some of the negative feedback we heard last time to try to make it more robust. So I would say we have a meeting as a subcommittee coming up, and then after we meet as a subcommittee, we'll be making a recommendation to the full commission about the process that we recommend. So I anticipate there will be changes, but we haven't met as a subcommittee yet.
Very interesting that our city structure is actually a part of maybe what was somewhat at issue at getting the right candidate. So you might see somebody that has been a city manager or a deputy city manager, but don't have the level of experience that it takes for this particular position. Are we out of step, or are we very different than so many cities like us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the feedback we got on some of the candidates last time is that they were coming from smaller communities. They were city managers in the other communities, but their communities were smaller. And that's where it's challenging, because there aren't many cities that have a population of 200,000 that are a city manager form of government. Typically it's a strong mayor, and then you have a deputy mayor, it's just the structure tends to be very different. And so that's where some of the feedback from the community that we heard, it was providing some education on the front end about having realistic expectations on the candidates, and that there just aren't a lot of candidates who are city managers in mid-size or large cities.
Totally makes sense. It's good that there's the opportunity to kind of dissect that and see what it'll take to bring in the right kinds of candidates.
Yeah.
All right, and switching gears just a little bit, a couple things we didn't get to earlier. Saw an announcement and heard a little bit and saw a little bit about Coit and Cambridge Parks, just now groundbreaking for some redevelopment.
Yeah, so we broke ground at those two parks, but we have a number of other groundbreakings coming up. And so we'll be out and about doing capital improvements in a number of parks this summer, spending about $4 million on park improvements. And we're really excited. This goes back to the voter-approved millage, which we're so grateful for. And so folks will start to see some of those improvements. We'll be in all three wards. I don't have the list of all the parks, but we'll have a number of park improvements happening this summer.
So all within this summer?
All this summer. So we'll be spending about $4 million in parks this summer doing park improvements. Everything from new playgrounds to basketball courts to whatever that park design is. That's what we'll be working on.
All right, and on a similar vein, the tree planting event was well attended, from what I could tell. And then, how many holes did you dig that day?
So I dug about 3, but I just got a report actually yesterday or the day before. We had 383 volunteers, so I'm so grateful to everyone who came out and planted trees with us. We planted just over 300 trees, largely in about a 10-block space around Sullivan Field. So if you drive through there, you'll see all of the trees largely in the right-of-way, and some along the expressway. Buffering in between the expressway and the neighborhood. But there's hundreds of trees out there. They have gator bags. We are partnering with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks. They'll be watering them all summer. And they're really nice size. They're larger kind of ball and burlap trees. So we're hopeful to see all of them survive.
We call a lot of this sort of greening initiatives. What other efforts are we looking for this summer?
Yeah, so we'll also be planting about 200 trees downtown. And then still working on securing a couple more grants to add about 400 trees along the expressway, both 131 and 196. Those trees need to be planted by contractors because of the proximity to the expressways and the slope, but we're really hoping to green the expressways this summer as well. And then the park improvements that I talked about, so you'll start to see a lot of greening, both with trees and with green space.
Very exciting, very exciting.
Yeah.
So the part of the year that we're in a season as well is maybe a little less exciting, but very critical. It's budget season,
Oh, yes.
and it's been underway, like you've been telling us for the last few months.
Yeah.
But probably getting time for some community input
Yeah.
and seeing some of the numbers. Tell us where the
Yeah.
process is for the city's fiscal year 19 budget, which begins July 1.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So we had the formal presentation of the preliminary fiscal plan. Fiscal plan, it's about a $530 million budget. A significant portion of that, I'd say just under $400 million, is enterprise funds. So it's water and sewer and streets and parking, and so enterprise funds are funds where the fee for the service can only be used for that service and pays for that. So like wastewater is one of our large users and largest enterprise fund. And then the general operating fund, which came in about $135 million. And general operating fund is for all things not paid for in enterprise funds. So police, fire, parks, economic development, planning. So those are the big buckets in the general operating fund. So that was presented to the full city commission, and now we go into weekly budget sessions. So tomorrow we have a 3-hour budget session, and we basically take the budget and at every single budget session, we take a section of it and take a deep dive into it. So every week between now and June 12th, we'll be having budget session. We'll be having a formal public hearing on June 5th. And then we're also working with some members in the community to have information easily accessible on our website. So we'll have I would say, customer-friendly budget process that you can go in and look at all of our revenues and all of our expenditures, and then you can weigh in on that and that platform, I should say, as well.
Okay, anything stand out? Is this a budget increase overall? Do you take it section by section? Have you had time to go through every section?
No, we just had we haven't touched any of the sections yet. We just did the overall presentation at our last commission meeting, so last week, Tuesday. So we'll start taking a deep dive. I mean, I think you'll see in there are some big ticket capital items that we're going to be taking a look at, including we need to upgrade all of our street lights, and with that we're looking at converting to LED, which will save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Has about an 8-year return on investment, but it'll be a significant investment because we have to replace all of the utility and conduit underneath the street lights, as well as the poles, as well as the lights. So in the budget proposal, we have a proposal to bond for that, and it would be a significant investment, but really needed. And some of our neighborhoods know that. We've heard from a lot of residents talking about the poor condition of our streetlights. Okay. So you'll see some big capital projects. Streets continues to be a priority, even though I know people keep calling me and they're frustrated with potholes and streets. I promise you, we are spending a lot of money on streets as quickly as we can. This year we're spending about $17 million on local streets. So we may not get to your street this year, but we have an entire plan, and you can find a whole list of every street we'll be touching this summer, this construction cycle, on the website, as well as a list of streets that are slated for next year.
Great. Thanks for giving us that information. We'll talk more about that next month. As we wrap up City Connection, I want to remind you both the mayor and I will be heading to a Rapidian fundraising event at Wealthy Theater, a storytelling event tonight. Some great speakers. We'll wrap up, though, for City Connection here on GRTV's Livewire Channel 24.